and welcome to this week's Wildlife Weekly Roundup. I'm your host, Tenley Thompson, and we've got some fantastic videos to show you all. So, the way that this is going to work is we're going to show you some great footage from around the greater Yellowstone ecosystem of all the fun things that our guides have been seeing this week. And then afterwards, you've got a chance to win a trivia question, which is worth $10 in our EcoTours gift store. Finally, at the end of this broadcast, I'll be answering your questions live. So if you've got some questions, feel free to start typing those in the comments and I'll see if I can answer them as they come. In the meantime, some of our other biologists are also in the comment section helping out as well. So feel free to comment throughout the broadcast. Tell us what you like, tell us what you'd see next week, and please do tell us where you're watching from. We definitely want to hear about that, as well as we'd appreciate it if you guys would share this video with your friends so that we can continue to improve it and make it bigger every week. So let's get started. Our first news of the week, as always, is grizzly bears, right? Seems like that's the big news every week, but this is grizzly bear breeding season, and we've got so much great stuff happening with the cubs right now. So let's start with everybody's favorite grizzly bear 399. Now we're lucky enough that our naturalist Kelsey got a really fantastic view this week, and let's check in with that. So for those of you guys who are just joining us, Kelsey is filming 399 here, who is very startled by an elk and some noise there, and her 4 cubs. She's probably the most famous grizzly bear in the world, and she's on an elk carcass with these cubs at this. And you can watch, she's being pretty darn careful. See if any of these predators or other bears approach and are trying to grab that carcass from her. Here we go. Now we can get a really good view of some of these cubs as they come out of the sagebrush. I know everybody this week has been asking about her and asking how the cubs are doing. They all look really good, and things are going well for them. They did have a pretty momentous week this week in that 399 decided the cubs were finally old enough to pass and get over Pilgrim Creek, which is an annual challenge for her cubs. And there is, of course, one small little runt who had a little trouble with all of this. Our naturalist Laura was there to document the whole thing. So let's check in with her.
Hi, this is Laura. I want to share with you my most thrilling sighting in Grand Teton National Park this week. I had the opportunity to see grizzly bear number 399 and her 4 cubs of the year swimming across Pilgrim Creek. The family of 5 came down to the edge of the water. 3 out of the 4 cubs quickly made the swim across the fast-flowing water. The 4th cub, the runt of the litter, was having a little difficulty. He was timid, he didn't want to get his feet wet. I understand, because that water's really cold. So 399, being a really great mother, over her lifetime, having given birth to 20 other cubs, knew she had to double back for that 4th cub. So she swam back across Pilgrim Creek to help that 4th cub make the crossing safely. The first attempt for that cub didn't go so well. He jumped into the water. He got swept up in the fast flow of Pilgrim Creek. And luckily, he was able to jump back out, shake it off, and try again. He was able to jump in on his 2nd attempt and quickly make that swift water crossing. The cub jumped back out the other side. He reunited with the family, and the 5 of them went to the next meadow to find more of their favorite food. The biscuit root, which is in full bloom in the northern range of Grand Teton National Park this week.
Thanks, Laura. So one of the great things now that the cubs have been able to make it across Pilgrim Creek is that they've got a whole lot more options available to them on a daily basis. And what's so fantastic is, despite how risky it sounds, 399's choice to take those cubs across the river rather than coming out to the highway and over the bridge like maybe another bear would have done is actually in the long run far safer for those cubs. And we're really glad to see that they're all doing well. Now, for those of you guys who are wondering sharing how some of the other famous grizzly bears of Grand Teton and Yellowstone are doing. We did have some views of Blondie and her little cub this week. They're doing really well, but they were from pretty far away, so we don't have good video of that. We also spotted a couple of the famous Yellowstone bears, which we hope to feature for you next week, and some other kind of male bears and subadult cubs that we're still kind of trying to figure out who's who. We did not see Grizzly Bear 610 this week with her two 2.5-year-old cubs. That's not necessarily surprising, but now that the elk calves have been born and they're down in the nursery grounds, we're going to start to see these females transition from things like biscuit root and starchy bulbs over to those elk calves full time. At least those are old enough and have the skill enough to catch elk calves, which is not that easy to do, and it should bring some of these guys back into a little bit more visibility again. So that's pretty cool. We got some good news from our grizzly bear contingent. We also wanted to check in this week with the great horned owls that have been hanging out very close to where EcoTour's guide and owner Taylor lives. Some of you guys have been asking us how these owls are doing since we first featured them about 3 weeks ago. So we thought we'd send Taylor out and we'll check in with him.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying these owl videos. It's been so fun to watch these owls over the past few weeks. There were 3 chicks in this nest. All of the owlets up to this point have survived. These particular owlets, there were 3 in the nest. Sometimes up to 6 eggs can be laid. And mostly it's the female that's incubating for close to 30 days. And then after the hatch occurs, then both parents share the responsibility of bringing back small mammals to feed these chicks. And then after about 5 weeks after the hatch, we did start to see the chicks come out of the nest and jump around on adjacent branches. And then just 9 weeks now, that's where we're at. They've taken their first flight, and for the next few weeks, for the next couple of months really, they're really gonna learn to fly. And as the time goes on, we expect them to kind of get further and further and further, away from that nesting tree where we originally photographed them and took the video. Their diet is varied, mostly small mammals and birds. There's quite a bit of waterfowl that this particular adult has been using to feed the chicks. But they could take anything from, geese, ducks, hawks, and even smaller owls. These birds maybe begin nesting very early in, late winter, possibly so that the young will have time to learn hunting skills before the next winter begins. In courtship, the male performs display flights, also feeds the female. And their nest, they typically use an old nest from another large bird or a cavity in a tree.
I've decided that maybe if reincarnation is a thing, that I might want to be reincarnated as an owl. It just looks like it would be really fun to be an owl. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm crazy or if that makes sense, or I don't know, what do you want to be reincarnated as? Because an owl seems like it'd be a pretty fun lifestyle for sure. Now, when naturalist Eric asked me what kind of footage that I would like to have for these Wildlife Weekly broadcasts, particularly this week's broadcast, I told him to go and film what he has a passion for. Now, a reminder, guys, if you have special requests, I will send out our naturalists and our guides to go get your special request if we can pull it off. So do comment those special requests, and don't forget to share this video so everybody can enjoy it live as well. But when I said to Eric, go do what's your passion, well, he said Yellowstone is my passion. And so we thought it would be really fun for those of you who are visiting us from far away, who've never had a chance to go to Yellowstone, to see a little bit of what it looks like in the spring. And of course, right now it's a little bit more quiet than usual with some of the concerns over COVID and some of these other issues. So let's check in with Eric. This is is a real treat. It's a spring tour of Yellowstone for you.
Hey folks, Jackson Hole Eco Tour Guide Eric Carr here, fresh back from a trip to Yellowstone National Park, where I got some footage of some deep canyons, some waterfalls, some geysers, and the beautiful Yellowstone Lake. My first stop upon entering the south gate was at Moose Falls. This 30-foot plunge waterfall was named during the 1885 Arnold Hague Geological Survey for the plentiful moose found in the southern entrance of the park. This falls is typically passed as it is just a mile inside the southern boundary. My next stop was at Lewis Canyon. This is a time lapse of the morning fog lifting from the canyon. As nighttime temperatures get down low, the river water evaporates and creates fog. As night turns to day, the warming temperatures help the air absorb the moisture and clear the skies. As I drove around Yellowstone's southern loop, I stopped along the shores of the mighty Yellowstone Lake, North America's largest lake above 7,000 feet in elevation. It has staggering statistics of 20 miles wide, 14 miles long, 141 miles of shoreline, and over 390 feet deep. The average water temperature in this lake is just 41 degrees Fahrenheit. It holds the largest population of cutthroat trout in North America. How a Pacific Ocean fish found itself trapped in a lake that feeds into the Atlantic Ocean has puzzled researchers for years. It is now thought that the lake used to drain out to the Snake River, which flows into the Pacific Ocean, and that's how those fish found their way up to the lake. Along the Yellowstone River in the Hayden Valley, there are typically numerous bison found eating the plentiful fresh grasses along the river's edge. This big fella decided to cruise past me in my parked car for a close encounter. If you look closely, you can see some brown-headed cowbirds walking along next to him, eating small insects that are disturbed and jump out of the way as he threatens to step on them with all 2,000 pounds of them. I also got to stop in the Fountain Paint Pot area and observed Silex Spring as well. In my opinion, one of Yellowstone's prettiest pools. At 27 feet, it discharges 75 to 100 gallons of 193 degree Fahrenheit water that supports large growth of cyanobacteria. The further away this water flows from the pool, the cooler it gets, and different temperatures support different colored thermophiles. The upper portion of Yellowstone Falls, at 109 feet, is quite an impressive sight. The brink, or edge, of the falls marks the junction between two different lava flows. The water flows over the harder rock on the right and plunges down, eroding the softer rock below. Viewing this, the Yellowstone River is currently at its peak level. As springtime air temperatures rise, the thick blanket of snow is melting from the mountains, trickling down small canyons and creeks, filling up the lakes and rivers with fresh, cold water. This river can swell up and carry over 10 times the amount of water in the spring as it does in the fall. After plunging over the upper falls, it heads only a quarter mile downstream, takes a sharp right turn to another waterfall, much larger than its predecessor. The lower falls of Yellowstone has a height of 308 feet, twice the height of Niagara Falls. With its black and white checkered back and blood-red eyes, the common loon is a beautiful sight. This one allowed me just a quick glimpse before headed back under the water to find its next meal.
So hopefully for you all that have never been to Yellowstone, that's an incentive to get to America's first national park. It is beautiful in the spring, particularly the waterfalls, which are just booming. You can see how much water is flowing out of the Yellowstone. So a big thanks to Eric, who took us on that virtual trip. I definitely think he's the best at filming sort of the scenic majesty of the ecosystem. So make sure if you've got something you'd like to see, we can put Eric on the case. I think I just saw in the comments Don was asking to see some of the beavers at Schwabackers, so maybe we'll send Eric after those beavers. I also am really excited to see my guests from last night on my trip are actually joining us, who've tuned into all of the Wildlife Wednesday broadcasts. So hi, Kelly. Hi, Austin. Hi to the whole family. I'm so glad you guys are here. And hopefully maybe you'll recognize some of this footage, although we're going to save some of those curlews we saw for next week. So there's your sneak peek for next week. Speaking of birds, Mark, Naturalist Mark, has quickly become a Wildlife Wednesday guide favorite, particularly for all of the nesting bird activity that he's able to capture and record. We've got a couple of videos from Mark this week, but I did want to start with these really cool nesting swallows.
I was able to capture some nest scouting behavior from some violet green swallows. And these swallows are secondary cavity nesters. So they do nest in cavities, but lack the physical capability of excavating those cavities themselves. So a lot of times they'll use old woodpecker holes, but in this particular instance, these swallows were investigating cavities up on this massive limestone cliff wall in Grand Teton National Park. There was a pretty significant insect hatch happening at the time, so there was a lot of nest scouting behavior combined with quite a feeding frenzy, which was really fun to watch. But it was interesting seeing their behavior as they were looking for places to raise their young.
So our naturalist Laura, who you guys saw earlier talking about the bears crossing the river, had probably the rarest sighting of the week, which is she actually got to capture some live views of a baby badger. Now, baby badgers are called kits, and they live in these dens. So let's check in and we'll sort of see this. And you can see there's our little baby badger. He's awfully cute. We don't see these guys very often because they are mostly holed up in their den to protect them from predators like hawks and coyotes. But this little guy decided to do a little bit of jailbreak, did a little bit of an escape, went out and got some sun. And here you can see one of the parents, hard to say if it's male or female, quickly coming over, grabbing this little fellow and taking him on back to the den. Pretty quick sighting. Look at that. Waddle, waddle, waddle. Pretty quick sighting that we had from Laura there, but I muted the reactions of her guests because they were so loud and so many oohs and ahs that it probably would have distracted from our viewing of it. But really, really a special event. I have certainly never seen a baby badger that young. I'm pretty jealous, but it was really an exciting view for me to even see via video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that as well. Now, the big thing this week for me were wildflowers, and I took a drive to go and see some wildflowers, and I ended up taking a little time lapse of the inside park road so you can kind of see how it looks at dusk right now. This part gets a little twisty-turny here. Hopefully I don't make anybody sick. But you can see it's just green and vivid and spring. Still a little bit of snow here and there, but it is really beautiful out right now. And the Teton Range still has that snow in it, and the wildflowers are everywhere. One of my favorite places to see them is out on Antelope Flats. So let's check that out with Taylor.
It's great to see the arrowleaf balsam root is reaching peak bloom here in Grand Teton National Park.
Now Kirk, who was hiking on top of Snow King, also caught the arrowleaf. There's a great view of the town of Jackson and southern Jackson Hole as well. Pretty beautiful stuff. Fun fact, I actually love arrowleaf balsam root so much that I actually averaged out the average blooming date and then got married based on that average bloom date, which for the record is June 20th, which means this peak blooming we're having this year is a little bit ahead of the 40-year average for that plant. And a lot of wildflowers do seem to be a little bit of ahead of schedule this year. That could be because of increases in snowfall and melt-off that we've had this year. It's nice and wet. We've had some good rain. That's definitely helping our wildflower growth. we sent out biologist Verlin, who is everybody's favorite for his morel mushrooms, to go see what he could find in the wildflower department. Let's check in with him.
Hey guys, Verlin here with EcoTour Adventures, up exploring a burn area just outside of Grand Teton National Park. Looking for one of my favorite things, as you all know, morel mushrooms, but we're finding no mushrooms, maybe a little too early. However, we are finding some really awesome wildflowers. One of my favorite things about spring here in the Teton area. I guess we're in the Gros Ventres now, but the neighboring mountain range to the more famous Tetons. As you look around, we've got these beautiful flowers, these purple ones right here, and then these bluish, more so colored purple flowers, and that would be low larkspur. Super common all the way down from the plains all the way up into the subalpine regions of the state here in Wyoming. That plant is, I guess, highly toxic to cattle, however, regularly consumed by all sorts of other grazers and browsers, such as elk, deer, pronghorn, and even sheep. But highly toxic to cattle, but not quite as toxic as its bigger brother, the tall larkspur, which blooms in abundance here during the month of June up near Two Ocean Lake in Grand Teton. One of my favorite areas to find wildflowers, but a little bit too early there yet. And if you guys move in a little bit here, we've got this right here is silky Phacelia, and not really something I see everywhere, but it's really thriving here in this burn, which makes sense because it does like disturbed soils. Walking around here, we found a little area that's super diverse with life. Right in front here, we've got this big boy, and this one here is green gentian. We had a massive bloom last year, and I had never noticed so much before, and it was kind of cool. This year it seems like the mule's ears are really doing well, kind of a super bloom of mule's ears. But this green gentian here, super cool plant, guys. It can take upwards of 70 years to flower, which I really think is interesting. If you move a little closer here, there's this really inconspicuous flower here. And this guy, I don't know if you can see him too good, but that little guy there is what we call a hairy clematis, also known as sugar bowl. And this guy's one of the first flowers to bloom here in the spring. It's not really noticed by many people, much more noticeable once it sets seeds, and it's known for its fuzzy kind of seed balls. This is a member of the poppy family, and this is golden corydalis. Beautiful little yellow flowers. Really kind of a neat one that I don't get to see too often. And wait, there's more. Here we have heart-leafed arnica, this pretty little yellow flower. This whole hillside's actually covered in this plant. These are just the first ones we could find that were in full bloom. Not only is it a pretty plant, but it's also known for its medicinal qualities. They're usually used topically, and I should say really only recommended to be used topically because it could be toxic if ingested, but commonly used to treat all sorts of different ailments, from muscle pain to sprains and broken bones, anything like that. Natives even used it to treat sore throats, but as I said, not recommended to be taken internally or ingested.
So we're out here walking through the woods and stepped over these trees here and stumbled upon a freshly born deer fawn. He's sitting right there, just a couple feet in front of me. Guys, remember when you find deer fawns out and about, they won't move, they'll stay there. Don't touch them, don't move them. It happens a lot. People pick these guys up and think they're lost, but mule deer are hiders, not keepers. For several weeks of this baby's life, this fawn, he's going to be hidden away from mom while she's out feeding, and she's going to return 4 or 5 times throughout the day to nurse. So what we're going to do here is we're going to back out slowly and not disturb him. Just remember, if you find deer fawns out and about, leave them be. Don't touch them. Don't move them especially. But really pretty cool sight to see.
All right, that deer was really cute. I used to raise baby deer whose mothers had been hit by cars, and every once in a while somebody thought it was a great idea. They thought the deer was abandoned, and they'd pick one up and they'd bring them to us, and we'd have to bottle feed them for months, which would significantly lower their overall survivability, because they didn't understand, of course, that baby deer are best when they're scentless, which they are, hidden away while mom continues to graze. If she sits right next to that baby, she's going to attract predators right in. But if she hides the baby, it's going to be much, much harder for any of those predators to find that little guy. So that was pretty neat. Now that heartleaf arnica Verlin was talking about, I've had several physical therapists swear by it. I've had doctors tell me it works. People buy it as a rub. You can get it in places like Whole Foods or more organic style grocery store, even some regular grocery stores. It's made throughout the Rocky Mountain West, but it's actually a product of Jackson Hole as well. People rub it on their skin and they say it makes their arthritis and their aches and sores feel better. So if you're looking for something new to try, maybe that heartleaf arnica will solve some of your problems of what ails you. Really neat to see it out there in the wild. So that's been pretty good for wildflowers, but our naturalist Mark has more good news on the bird front from us. People asked us to check back in with those really cute little red-tailed hawk chicks that we've been following for the last couple of weeks, as well as a big surprise from him.
Hi folks, Mark Beil here with EcoTour Adventures. And a couple of exciting things happened to me this week. As I went back to investigate and check in on the red-tailed hawk nest, I discovered that there is actually a third hawklet going in the nest right now. Up until this point, I had only been able to see 2 heads sticking up. And this week, as the adults brought back food, a third hawklet showed its face, and now we have 3 hawklets to watch for the next month or so until they get ready to fledge. So that's really exciting. The other exciting find I had this week was an active broad-tailed hummingbird nest. Now, as you can imagine, hummingbird nests are tiny. They're about the size of a quarter, and they're these very intricately made structures that are all bound together with foliose lichen and held together with spider webs. So they're really impressive structures. Now, this particular nest that I found did have a broad-tailed female sitting on eggs. So it's really exciting to know that we are going to be able to watch the progress of not only this red-tailed hawk nest over the next month or so, but now we can keep eyes on an active broad-tailed hummingbird nest as well. And we can see both ends of the spectrum, from one of a very large hawk nest to a tiny, tiny, tiny little hummingbird nest. Should be a lot of fun to keep our eyes on.
Okay, now that makes me think, maybe I want to be reincarnated as a hummingbird, but they're kind of aggressive. That's not really my style. I know I definitely don't want to be a swallow because they work too hard. I don't know, if you guys can come up with a bird that enables me to fly that's also maybe a little lazy, do let me know in the comments what probably would be ideal for me. In the meantime, I do encourage you guys, please do share our video if you do have the opportunity or you wish to. We'd love to have more people be able to watch this video live. We've got tens of thousands of people actually that are watching it after it's already broadcast and you can see it later, which has been really, really neat to see. But we'd love to be able to have some outreach with our biologists, be able to answer people's questions live and what have you. So if you think this is fun, go ahead and let your friends know about it, and we sure would appreciate it. We're not trying to pummel you with that sort of a request, but we think it would be really fun if more people got a chance to check out some of this great stuff. Now, we have an ongoing series of wildlife you can find in your own backyard, because we think it's really important that we show you these really amazing animals like wolves and grizzly bears, and we've got some mountain lion footage coming soon, sneak peek for that, so that you can see these really cool things that you might not get a chance to see otherwise. But there's so much going on in your own hometown, in your own backyard. You just have to get out there and look. I've had an obsession this week with ants. There's so much ant activity out there. I've really been enjoying seeing a lot of our insects, but there's a lot of bigger stuff going on in the yard too. Let's check in with Taylor, who found this fantastic magpie nest.
Hello everyone. So sometimes we don't have to go into wild settings to find wildlife. So much wildlife occurs in our backyards. All we need to do is listen, pay attention, and it unfolds in front of us. So here I'm in our neighborhood in Jackson, Wyoming, and I've been watching this magpie nest over the past couple of weeks. Their nests are fascinating. sphere nests, a large sphere the size of a yoga ball with an entrance just big enough for the magpie adults. So magpies are in the Corvidae family, so related to ravens and crows, and they'll nest anywhere from 5 to 25 feet off the ground. And here in this blue spruce is where we've found this nest. Like I've said, we've been watching it for the past month, and females, they'll lay anywhere from 5 to 9 eggs. And this case, there were 7 laid. Right now, there's only 5 chicks remaining. So here's this sphere, and for scale, remember about the size of a yoga ball. And you can see this opening. So after the female incubates for just a couple of weeks, then the chicks are growing and being fed by mom, mainly by their female, for about 3 weeks. And here they are. There's 5 chicks, and they are just as content as can be. The parents, they're spending most of their time feeding these birds in the late evening hours and early dawn hours. Just to give you guys another look. Yeah, so this is the black-billed magpie.
Thanks, Taylor. Next, we've got some really fun footage from Kelsey. I'm always amazed at how agile bison are, and when I try to explain it to guests, they typically don't believe that they're able to do the feats that I tell them. Let's check in with Kelsey, who's got the video to prove it.
Hey guys, Kelsey here. I wanted to talk to you about this awesome video that I happened to get while on a sunset tour last week. It's of a bison jumping over a fence, and it brings up a really important topic here in Jackson, which is fences. Fences, the West is filled with thousands of miles of fences, and unfortunately fences do restrict wildlife movement. Back during the days of westward expansion and settlement, the most popular fencing style was something called a buck and rail or buck rail fence. It looks like an upside down V. It's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And while this style is really great for corralling cattle and horses, it's pretty difficult for wildlife to jump over that fence without getting caught or tangled or injured by those bottom rails of the fence. We still do have a need for fencing out here. There's still plenty of agriculture out west, and there's actually a local organization that we volunteer our time with called the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation. And one of their main objectives is to replace this outdated buck rail fencing with more wildlife friendly fencing. The specific style is called a top rail fence. The way this fence looks is it has one top wooden rail, top rail, followed by strands of single strand wire below it, not barbed wire, because barbed wire again can injure animals. And that bottom strand of wire is just high enough off the ground that the pronghorn antelope are able to crawl under it. They don't jump fences, they go underneath. So what you see in this video is a great example of a bison jumping over a top rail fence. Of course, that top rail is missing. This bison was smart enough to seek out a weakness in the fence. So he didn't need to jump as high, but don't be fooled. These animals can, if that rail had been there, this bison could have easily cleared that fence. Bison, believe it or not, can jump up to 6 feet high, which is pretty impressive for an animal that can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, don't you think?
Thanks, Kelsey. So I would have you note that a lot of our footage every week is just taken on our cell phones when we're out and about with guests or on our own. We've got an amazing abundance of wildlife here in the Great Yellowstone ecosystem, so we encourage you to come and visit. Come tell us what you want to see on a tour. Our guides are here to take you out. We'll take you on a big fun adventure. We had so much footage from trips this week that we didn't have the time here to go and look at all of these. And so I wanted to give everybody sort of a short glimpse of some of the things we've been seeing on our trips this week, and give you guys just sort of these brief ideas of what's going on elsewise in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Now, before we do that, I do want to remind everybody we've got our trivia question coming up. So get ready to answer that. And then in addition, I'll be answering your questions live at the end of this broadcast. So if you've got a question, go ahead and write it in the comments for me. I've seen that we're getting a lot of good comments in there, maybe a couple questions already. So see if you can't stump me, ask me a good one. Don, I'll definitely see if I can't get you an answer about raspberry as well. But in the meantime, here's a little montage of some of the fun things that we've been seeing this week.
These deer fawn are following their mother into the trees. She is just out of view. These guys are twins, and typically deer give birth to one fawn their first pregnancy, and subsequent pregnancies they typically give birth to twins.
So thanks for that. We really appreciate that. That was Elise, and then we had Kelsey check out these really, really cute black bear cubs up in a tree in Grand Teton, northern Grand Teton National Park, and they were so cute. I wish we had more time to just watch those. Eric caught one of these very rare trumpeter swans up in Yellowstone settling down for a nap, which was fun to see. We had lots of footage of bison calves, but I think Mark probably got some of the best here of this young, what we call red dog calf. That's what the cowboys used to call them, nursing. Pretty darn cute stuff. Pronghorn are still doing really well. Lots of footage of pronghorn from guides this week. Mark also took this great footage of this herd in southern Jackson Hole. Good to see those guys. And then on the subject of Mark, of course, more birds. This is a black-headed female grosbeak. You can see that yellow band of color up near the top of its head. So that was a fun sighting for him and his guests. Pretty cool stuff. Taylor got some great views of these white pelicans, and then there's a great blue heron that's going to photobomb us in this footage, along with those cormorants. There's the great blue heron. Those dark cormorants next to those white pelicans. That was pretty fun to see, and pretty good for his guests. Laura got this great view of this beautiful mountain bluebird, and sent that in and was out looking at some of the really neat birds in the area. And Mark actually got some footage of some bluebirds that are nesting. Here's the male here in the nest cavity, but he also got some great footage of the female with nesting material, actually coming back to the nest, back and forth, and cleaning house, so to speak. I got some footage of one of my favorite birds, the robin, and he was doing some singing and hanging out right by a lake in the Grovant Range, about a mile outside of Grand Teton. And then yellow bells, another wildflower, are in peak bloom right now as well. So some real fun stuff out and about on trips. So pretty exciting to see all of that. If you enjoy sort of that quick little montage at the end, let us know that's something new we're trying this week. Just because we get so much cool stuff, it'd be really fun for everybody to just get these brief glimpses of some of these other more unusual things that are going on as well. Okay, so if you found this fun, we're having another live broadcast, a broadcast on Friday at 11 a.m. It's sort of a lunch series with Ecotours naturalist Josh, and I hope you'll join him in the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation to learn about wildlife friendlier fencing. So just a little bit like we were talking about earlier with those bison crossing over that fence. There's another great view of a bison hopping one of those top rail fences. Join Josh and join the Jackson Hole Wildlife Foundation to learn how you can help wildlife, no matter where you live, move safely across the landscape. Should be really, really fun. It's not going to be a super long broadcast, something you can tune into, check out, maybe learn something fun, and then go about your day. So don't forget to check that out on Friday at 11 a.m. And then, of course, we've got our trivia question of the week. So, are you guys ready? So the first thing we have to do is answer last week's trivia question. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly show it to you all again. Feel free to guess in the comments. That won't win you the gift card. We already had a winner from last week. But see if you can figure out the answer. The question last week was, what is the dark stuff that these deer are hanging out in? And we told you, of course, that it was a burn. But what was the plant? What was that plant that they were sitting in? So Maddie, who is our trivia master, went ahead and recorded me a video answer to that question. Let's check in with him.
Trivia answer: the dark matter protruding out of the ground where the mule deer were grazing, right behind the National Museum of Wildlife Art, that is burnt wild sage or sagebrush. Now that root system goes down some 30 feet to tap into water sources. The Mormons actually tried up at Mormon Row to burn all the sagebrush when they arrived here to clear the land so they could have their livestock grazing and work the land. But what happens is sagebrush is a little more sturdy, a little more resilient than that. And what they had to do, ultimately, the Mormons had to pull up the sagebrush by hand. Amazing. But anyway, that's the answer to the trivia. That is wild sage or sagebrush. Find some, grab a handful. Oh, smells so good.
Okay, did you get the question right? I hope you got it right. All right, so this is this week's trivia question. Now here's your chance to win $10 at our online store. So we started this online store during the quarantine and closure when we weren't operating, so that we could continue to help fund health insurance for our guides and employees during the closure. And we're still using the proceeds from our online store to continue and fund that health insurance. So if you'd like to help us out even from afar, we've got some really, really fantastic stuff in that store. I've been talking about the owl stickers for the last 2 weeks, and I noticed some people took me up on that and bought some of those. I wanted to feature some of the other stuff that's there. We've got some Mangelson prints, some awesome Stio logo wear, and things that the guides themselves, who are pretty talented, make. So guide Chelsea actually, quote unquote, paints with gunpowder. How cool is that? And she makes these amazing gunpowder canvases. So our feature of the store this week is this really cool gunpowder Wyoming flag. So if you think that's pretty cool and you want to have one of those in your house, go ahead and check out our online store. And the original can be yours. Thank you, Chelsea, very much for letting us feature your awesome artwork. Painting with gunpowder is amazing. I highly recommend you follow her, Chelsea Wren, on Instagram. You can see videos of her painting with gunpowder. It's pretty cool. But here's this week's question that'll get you $10 closer to one of those cool paintings. And the people have been complaining my questions have been too hard, so I'm going to try to give you an easier one this week, which is just tell me in the comments section, what is this animal? Hopefully most of you guys know what this is and you've seen one before. I'm looking for the full name of the animal. If you know the answer, go ahead and put it in the comments section. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick one person who answered correctly at random to win that gift card. So see if you know the answer, go ahead and give us some comments. In the meantime, that's the videos we have for the week. I'm here to answer your questions about the natural world, about biology, about the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Go ahead and type some questions in the comments if you have them. Make sure you share this video with your friends if you've enjoyed it. Let me sort of see, I'm going to grab my iPad here and see what some of these questions are and see if I can't get you some of the answers. Ooh, we're getting some good answers for our trivia question. So good, guys. We're making some progress. Maybe I need to make my questions a little bit easier. Is that one too easy, you think? Maybe a little harder? I don't know. I don't think I can make everybody happy on that. Let's see here. Oh, people talking about arnica. Awesome. Some questions from Adon is asking, are these chicks going to be banded? Are we going to have those great horned owl chicks banded? And Don, birds are banded for one of two reasons. They're either banded as part of a nationwide or worldwide banding program where we're trying to understand a specific species, or a specific migratory area, or they're banded as part of a specific scientific project. Now, I've only participated in 2 banding projects as part of my research. I'm more of a mammal girl in my background, but both of those banding projects were general banding projects, which is to say we were looking for animals that were using the migratory flyway to try to understand what animals were in the area and what seasons, and then by banding them with a unique identification number, we're able to actually figure out where those birds are traveling even many, many years later. Brian Bedrosian, a noted biologist in the United States for raptors and big birds of prey, he banded a bald eagle, I think, what were they saying? Maybe 20 years ago, maybe more than that, and they ended up recapturing this eagle, and he was still wearing that band. It was one of the longest lived bald eagles in the wild that they'd ever seen, and we wouldn't have known that information without a band. Putting a band on a bird does not hurt, it's not painful for them, doesn't chafe or bind at them. It's a long established practice that has been going on for a long time. These particularly great horned owl chicks most likely will not be banded for the very simple reason that we don't have a study right now going on for great horned owl chicks. We have some studies going on with great gray owls, which of course we've featured some of that study research in some talks in the past. Check out our video section to see a little bit more about that. We do have some research going on in the United States for snowy owls right now. There may be some research going on for great horned owls in other areas, but not here in Jackson Hole. So those little owlets are safe from the ravages of banding. But banding can tell us a lot of really, really cool information. We had an osprey banding project in the valley a number of years ago, in part because we didn't really understand where osprey migrated. We knew they came here every summer, but we knew they were gone in the winter, and we didn't know where they went. There's a very famous osprey who lives on the Moose Wilson Road who travels here every year, and she's very long-lived, and she's famous for raising multiple chicks, which is unusual for osprey. And they went ahead and they banded those chicks for a number of years with GPS backpacks and bands, and it was enabling them to figure out where they were migrating, and the assumption was they'd all go to the same place, like mom would teach them a location, and not at all. Some of the chicks went to Cuba, some went to Florida, some went to Texas, some went into Mexico. Those chicks were going all over the place. They were just heading south. They were getting away from our winter weather. So banding and collaring, they can tell us a lot of information, but you don't get to just band things at a whim. You have to have an ethics community an ethics committee at a university or a respectable organization look at the ethics of what you're trying to do. Is the information you're trying to attain important enough that capturing an animal briefly and placing a band on them is the ethical and right thing to do, right? Do no harm would be the first thing we want to try for. And so we don't band as many animals as you'd think, but if you ever do see an animal with a band, particularly one with a number, definitely look those up. Our trumpeter swans sometimes have numbers on their necks. Some other animals with really big numbers that you can see from a distance would be things like California condors will have big numbers on them. Definitely record those and help spread that information for sure. There's even a banding project going on right now for butterflies. People are actually banding monarch butterflies traveling down to Mexico. We've gotten so good with technology and lightweight that it's not a burden for them to have these little receivers, which is just tremendous to me. So thank you, Don, for that question. Let's see if we've got some other questions here. Question of why are they called red dogs and why are they red, please? So thanks very much for that question. So she's referring to bison babies. They're really red in color. They're vibrant red when they're born. And the question is, why are they called red dogs? And then also, why are they red to begin with? So they're called red dogs. That's an old cowboy term. I'm sure you've heard the old cowboy songs where they say, run along little doggies. That was their name for young cattle and calves. So bison calves were called red dogs because they were bright red, using that run along little doggy name for calves. But as for the red thing, that seems kind of counterintuitive. Why would an animal want to be bright red? Well, it all has to do with animal vision. And it's really hard to ask a wild animal how they see color, right? But how would you figure that out? But there's been a couple interesting studies that have had some suggestive conclusions, and that is that most animals don't see color in the way that we do. Many animals see far more vivid color than we do. Some animals see much sharper color. In your eye, you have what are called rods and cones. And the rods are really good at looking at sharp detail, and the cones are really good at looking at color. And if you look at an eye of an animal and you look at how many rods they have versus how many cones they have, it can tell you a little bit about how much the depth perception, how sharp their vision is, but also how much color they can see. So things like hawks have lots of rods in their eyes. They can see really sharp things from far away, but they can't see a lot of color. They don't have a lot of cones. Versus something like a mantis shrimp, very famously, is almost all cones, can see into the infrared, and can probably see all sorts of colors that we can't even conceive of. Generally, most predators struggle on the red-green spectrum. They're colorblind, probably, on the red-green spectrum, which is to say red and green appear as the same color to a wolf or to a mountain lion, probably to a grizzly bear, which is to say a young red bison is going to blend into the grass of all things by being so brightly colored. Really bizarre, right? This is interesting. You can experiment it actually with your own dog or cat in your house, which is to say they're also probably colorblind on the red-green spectrum, which is part of the reason that dogs probably really like tennis balls. That day glow yellow-green color really sticks out very vividly for them. But try and experiment if you want in your own home. Buy some toys that are red or green or more vividly another color, and you're going to see, generally speaking, they're not going to be big fans of those red toys. You might like the red toys, but generally dogs and cats, and that includes wild mountain lions and Canada lynx and bobcats, as well as wolves and coyotes, probably don't see very well the difference between red and green. So thank you very much for that question. That's a really fun one. It's kind of a crazy idea to think a bright red animal would be blending in the grass. By the time they're a little older and they're not as vulnerable to predators in a couple weeks here, they'll start to brown up just like the adults, and they'll stop being that bright, vivid red, almost orangey color. So thanks for that question. That's a great one. Let's see what we have here. Hang on, there's a lot of comments. I'm really proud of you guys. Thanks for commenting. This is so awesome. Ooh, and comment, tell me where you're watching from, because that's fun too. Don was asking, is it true that Raspberry was seen with a koi? So for all of those of you who don't speak bear watcher speak, Raspberry is a grizzly bear, and a koi is short for cub of the year. That means a cub that was just born this year. Don, you know, none of us have seen Raspberry yet. For those of you guys unfamiliar with all these different celebrity bears, Raspberry very famously likes to hang out kind of vaguely near the shores of Yellowstone Lake in the spring. And then coming into July, when the cutthroat trout and things start to spawn, she'll either stay there, or when she was young, she'd actually move off because the big male bears were too intimidating for her. I have also heard rumors of a koi with Raspberry, but nobody yet has taken a photo to prove this. And so the thing about bear watchers is they're always very quick to be very excited about bears they like having new young cubs. The first time somebody told me 399 had quadruplets, I didn't believe them. I said, no, they don't. That's just a rumor. You're making that up. And of course she does. I have heard rumors that yes, she does have a koi, but I have not had that confirmed yet. And being the good scientist that I am, I want evidence before I say one way or another. People have seen Snow, same family as Raspberry, but I don't actually know, Dawn, whether or not that koi rumor is true or not. But we'll keep you posted. Hopefully we'll get some footage in the coming weeks of her. She's far more likely to be coming down into the valley floor if she has cubs, because she likes to use people a bit as a shield against male bears who will kill any cubs they can find, just like some of these other female bears do. So if she does have a coy, it's pretty likely we'll be seeing her relatively soon, and we'll have some photo evidence. So stay tuned on that. We'll see if we can't get you some answers. Hang on, still reading. Denise says, just played Chuck It with the dogs and was amazed that one could seem to see the dark orange ball that was right next to her. Now I know why. Oh, could not see. Now I know why and wonder why Chuck It makes their balls that color. I would suggest probably because Chuck It doesn't know what I just said. Now keep in mind, it's really hard to say to a dog, hey, do you see red and green as the same color, right? So some of these studies that have been done have been pretty fascinating and pretty clever to try to sort of understand this. And they tend to suggest, but we can't exactly prove what I just said. But things like bison being red in color also are strongly suggestive, right? Nature gives her own clues to a lot of these interesting questions in the natural world. And the question of animal vision, just, I don't know, I could talk about that for ages. I won't bore you guys, but it's pretty darn fascinating stuff. Laura asks, where do the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep go in the summer? Ooh, that's a little bit of a hint there, Laura. It depends on the herd of sheep. So here in the Teton range, we have two major herds. We've got what they're called the Teton herd that hang out in the Teton range of mountains, which is on the west end of the valley. And then we have the Grovant herd, which hang out in the Grovant range on the east end of the valley. I know those names don't sound particularly creative, but they are quite descriptive. In the wintertime, the Grovant herd comes down onto the National Elk Refuge. And then in the summer, they actually follow what's called the green swarm or the green migration. As the snow starts to melt, the green starts to rise, all that grass and greenery and nutritious stuff starts to rise up the mountainsides, and the mountains just come into bloom. And it's really fascinating. Something that's blooming as a wildflower on the valley floor might be blooming a month or even a month and a half later up in the high mountains of the Grovants and the Teton range. And the mountain goats follow that green wave, that green migration of grass and greenery right up the mountainsides. I do see them in cliff areas pretty high in the Grovants in the summertime. There's some places you can kind of go and have success. But the Teton sheep herd is a little bit more tricky. So that particular herd of sheep used to migrate in the wintertime down to East and West Grovant Butte, just outside the town of Jackson. And probably in the 1950s, that migration was disrupted by human ranching and road building activity. And so they now are year-round up in the high peaks of the Teton Range. So to see those guys, you'd have to get pretty high, definitely above tree level would be preferred, up into the scree areas and cliff areas of the Teton Range. If you hike any of our major canyons and you look up on those rock walls, there's definitely some chances you can see them, but they're very, very shy. They see people at a half a mile and they run for it. It's really tough to see them in the summertime, but I've done a little bit of climbing in the Tetons, been up the Grand Teton and some of these other peaks, and if you're doing any rock climbing, you do have some chances to see them that time of year. And then backcountry skiers in the winter will sometimes see them as well. So thanks for that great question. Sure appreciate it. Let's see. I think I saw one more question here. Judy says, we're coming to Yellowstone in 10 days and would like to know the best place to see moose. We've been to that beautiful part of the country every summer and have seen everything except a moose. Thanks for the info and the incredible video. Judy, thank you so much for asking a question for sure. We're excited you're going to be coming into the valley. Sounds like you're going to Yellowstone, perhaps maybe not Grand Teton or Jackson Hole. Yellowstone's really interesting. It is a caldera, right? It is the crater of a dormant volcano, and as such, isn't necessarily terribly well suited for moose for the vast majority of Yellowstone National Park. There are some places that you can see moose in Yellowstone. The best way to do it, of course, would be to book a trip with us, right? Why don't you call us up, book a trip, we'll find you a moose. But if you are going to go out on your own, the southern end of the park Right after you get out of Lewis Canyon, there's an area called Lewis Falls. The meadows right along in that area can be really a great area to see some moose. Another really good area can be the northeast corner of the park up in the Lamar Valley heading towards Cook City, Montana. Right on the edge of the park there can be a really good place to see moose, so there's definitely some possibilities there. There's a couple other kind of open meadows areas. There's one by Electric Peak, for instance, that can be good, but in general, moose are pretty hard to find in Yellowstone. Moose density actually was much higher before the fires of 1988, probably artificially high, probably too many moose, and now it's probably back down to where we would expect it to be. So it's kind of fascinating when you look back at the fires of '88, almost every species in the park benefited in the long run from the removal of dead debris and old dried up lodgepole pine trees. But the one exception would be moose, who probably did quite well with old growth lodgepole pine. And so their numbers perhaps are a little lower. If you go for some hikes down in the southern end of the park by, like, say, Heart Lake, some of these are just a mile or so back, Lewis Lake and the like, you're going to have some pretty good opportunities for sure to see them there. I did one hike one time in Lewis Lake and we found 12 moose. And I think it's like 2 miles up and 2 miles back to Heart Lake. I can't remember how far, but 12 moose, which was too many moose because we were having to dodge them constantly. And it was about this time of year. So that could be a really good place to go. Now, Grand Teton is filled with moose. We're famous for our moose down here. It's actually a little bit easier to see them down here, a lot easier to see them. If you're interested in that, do let us know. We can certainly help you out with that, either with a tour or something along those lines. But we wish you lots of luck. Sounds like you've been looking for a moose a couple times. You haven't been successful yet. Might be because Yellowstone's kind of a tough place for moose. Definitely head down into Grand Teton for the day if you get the chance. Moose are riparian. They like lakeside, streamside, wet, marshy, wet habitat. They love to munch on willows in the summertime. So if you see all of that kind of stuff, start keeping your eye open for moose. Remember to keep your distance. They can be pretty aggressive animals if you're not careful, and all animals need their space for sure. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Okay, I think I got all the questions. If you've got one and you're watching this video later, just ask us in the comment center section. We'll continue answering all these questions all week long, get you guys some answers for sure. It's been such a pleasure, guys, to have you join us here on this Wildlife Wednesday. Remember to definitely share the video if you get the opportunity. We sure would appreciate that. We hope to see y'all in Jackson Hole sometime soon, but in the meantime, this hopefully was a good couch vacation for you. We thank you for joining us. Have a wild week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. So long!